Hello and welcome to Electric Sheep episode 12. My name is Paul Andrews and I'm joined in the studio today by Carl Sykes.
Hello once again.
And our very special guest, Dr. Carl Peters. We'll be talking to Carl a little bit later on. Carl is the Dean of the Faculty of Education and Social Sciences at the University of Wales, Newport. But before we get into that, we'll do our usual kind of weekly roundup. So there's only two of us this week. Yes. Poor old Elizabeth is not feeling too good. So, Carl, what have you been doing this week?
Well, just very quickly before I say what I've been doing this week, I think we do need to make people aware there are two Carls in the recording studio today,
yes.
so this could get a little bit complicated and a bit confusing as we work our way through. We'll need some sort of system.
Dr. Carl.
And just plain old nobody Carl.
Nobody Carl.
But I just thought I'd point that out quickly. So this week, I'm just as a kind of a background to this story. In my spare time, as one of my hobbies, I like to do a bit of kind of TV and film background work. I'm not going to go too much into that, but there's a reason I'm mentioning it. And the reason is that I've been looking to kind of put together a site for myself where I could kind of showcase some of the stuff that I've been doing. Nothing showy, I'm not a star or anything, but just to kind of put together.
He has been on Casualty.
I have been on Casualty, so I mean, absolutely, yes, quite. So what I've been doing is looking at how I can kind of promote the stuff I've been doing, and we've talked in quite detail about Google Sites as a way of producing your own kind of quick and easy website. But I wanted to look at alternatives to Google Sites and see what else was out there that I could have a go at creating my own site with. And actually, bizarrely enough, I've been playing around with a particular site for a little while now, and then happened to notice on your recent update for your website that you've kind of found the same thing, and it's a site called Wix.
Yes.
Which I know you've kind of brought up fairly recently. And essentially, Wix is a free website builder. It allows you to build kind of websites, mobile sites, Facebook pages, and blogs. So it's got quite a huge functionality. And I know it's something that, I've reading the information that you've put on your site, something that you found quite interesting as well. And it is good to always have an alternative to the stuff that we tend to use quite regularly. So I've had a little play around with Wix, and I found it's actually a very, very useful and very, very easy to use site. There's no coding involved at all for a start, which is always great. I mean, not that there's a huge amount with Google Sites anyway, but essentially it allows you to really easily customize purpose-built templates for sites. Let's say, for example, if you're an engineer and you want to advertise your company, or you're a cook, or whatever you might be, there are a number of templates on there based around a particular type of employment that you might work in. And it allows you to take those templates and to customize them in a way that best suits you and your business or the thing you're trying to promote. Not just for businesses, but I mean, I think certainly it's a great way for people who are starting off perhaps in businesses to kind of showcase what they do and the site, the product that they have available. There are hundreds of templates that you can choose from on there, which is fantastic, and you can kind of mix and match information to kind of really tighten it and get something useful that you can have as an output to showcase yourself online. I've sort of written a few notes down, so I'm just kind of reading through to see kind of the key stuff to pick out. And actually, one of the really good things I like about it is that it allows drag and drop technology as part of the creation of the site, which I think is really, really useful. We use, for those who've listened regularly, we use Moodle as our kind of VLE, and that in our recent upgrade has allowed the integration of drag and drop technology into it, and it just makes life so much easier. Not just for kind of the academic staff who are using it, but for us as learning technologists who are always having to come up against problems with adding documents in earlier versions of Moodle. So this drag and drop technology is fantastic, and I think with the creation of your own site, the easier you can make it for the user, the better an end product you're going to have, essentially. So I really like that functionality with Wix. And they basically say that the hosting they have is 100% free and extremely reliable hosting. So I think that's really, really useful as well, that when you put your product up online, it's reliably hosted and it's available all the time. And there's no cost to you. And I think I keep coming back to this week in, week out, but the things that don't cost anything are always kind of the route we're going down. Free is always good, and we as much as possible never try to promote something where there's a cost or any cost at all involved. So the more free stuff that's out there, the better. And I think this is a really good example. Wix is just one of a number of things. There's another site that springs to mind called Pathbright, which also again I've been playing with, but I've specifically focused on Wix, and I think there are listeners out there who perhaps might want to showcase what they do. but they don't know how to start out. And maybe, with Google Sites, I think perhaps you have to have a little bit of training on Google Sites to get yourself up and running. Certainly with our mentors that we've worked with, and again, we've mentioned this in previous shows. We've worked with the mentors to help them create their own sites or e-portfolios, but it does take a little bit of training, and we get them in a room, and myself or you or Elizabeth will sit with them and kind of take them through the steps. Whereas I think there's almost next to no training needed with Wix. It literally is a case of you can sit down, it'll take you through step by step what you need to do, and very, very quickly you can have an end product that you can go back to and refer to and tweak whenever you need to. So yeah, I think it's a great site with a lot of potential, and certainly worth a look.
Yeah, because we had Sam Coleman, one of our students, he was on last week.
That's right.
And he said he was using Wix, I think, to develop his own website as well.
I must have missed that. Okay.
Yeah, because I know at the moment I'm currently, as we're recording this, I've been editing last week's podcast as well.
So it's fresh in your mind.
It's fresh in my mind, yeah. And because he was talking about he's developing this game called Leviathan.
That's right.
And he at the moment he's got like a WordPress blog which is going to blog everything about this game. But I believe he was going to use Wix either as some kind of electronic portfolio for himself or as for a website for the game once it launches. The point he was trying to make was that certainly he is an immensely talented graphical artist.
Absolutely.
So for someone with a very keen eye for kind of style, as well as the kind of the substance to back it up with, he was kind of saying that Wix was something that was well worth considering.
Absolutely. And having said that, I think it has kind of sparked a memory deep and long buried in my mind here. But I remember you saying absolutely that he found the Google Sites was very interesting and useful for him to kind of get an introductory ground into the portfolio creation. But then, as you say, once he wanted something more stylistic and something that was more purposeful and useful to his style of production, he then moved on to others. And I think, yes, you're right, Wix was something that he then mentioned. So maybe that was what implanted the idea in my head first of all, way back last week.
To Wix on the blog.
Yes.
Put a link to Wix as well if you like, and so yeah, people can kind of check it out and make some sites.
Absolutely, yeah, fantastic. Well, moving on slightly now to you, Paul. I'm sure you've got something that you want to tell us about. And I know last week you weren't talking about a particular product. You were talking about a talk that you'd gone to at the Millennium Stadium on health and safety.
Yes.
Is it something similar this week, or is it a product? What are we looking at?
Well, it's a bit of both. And it's not me. It wasn't me who was doing this. It was actually, I was working with two of our lecturers, our sports lecturers, some fine folks. One's called Andy Thomas and another called Charlie Wolfen. And they're both going to be coming in to this podcast.
They are indeed. They are booked in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, they're actually going to come and talk about in more depth what I'm just going to kind of gloss over now. In that, what they did this week for the second time is they used a Google Hangout to broadcast a live video feed to YouTube.
Okay.
Which they then embedded into a Google site.
Right. Which
they then sent the details of the site to prospective students who had applied to do their sports coaching courses and their other sports courses. And typically, if you apply to do a course, you get invited to an open day. And what they were saying was that the open days are great and everything, but sometimes students, for whatever reason, can't make the open day.
Yeah, of course.
So they said, well, okay, we want to build this little website with this live video feed, and we'll send a letter to all of these prospective students going, if you log on at this time, you will be able to see us live, you'll be able to hear us, and also you'll be able to pose questions to us via, they set up a specific Facebook page, a specific Twitter account, and they also set up a specific email account as well.
Right, okay.
My job initially was to kind of almost act as the consultant to kind of make all of the technology work. Mm-hmm. But that was kind of 3 months ago. I actually didn't do a great deal. I was kind of there as a safety net, but fair play to them. I wasn't needed. It was fantastic. And I was able to just sit and watch as an audience member to see them actually doing it, and they were loving it. The thing lasted for about an hour, and they had a big PowerPoint presentation in the background, and it really was like watching some kind of live TV show. Because I think when we first started kind of kicking the idea around a couple of months back, both Andy and Charlie, and I don't think they'd mind me saying this, were a little bit concerned that no one would watch.
Right,
okay. That was a legitimate concern, and so what they did was they wrote down a load of made-up questions.
Right.
They were going to pretend if they didn't have anyone. And to their credit, on the first and second one, didn't need to use any of them. So the questions were coming in thick and fast. And it was wonderful because they were able to say, oh, yeah, we've just got a question from so-and-so, and they're based in such and such, and their question is... And they could answer all those questions as they were coming in.
Yeah.
And the beauty of it is, because it was broadcast to YouTube, what YouTube then does is after the broadcast, it then saves the whole thing so that they could say to prospective students who couldn't, for whatever reason, join them live, well, you can watch this anytime you like. And because it's on YouTube, it works on phones, games consoles, tablets, anything that connects to the internet pretty much can look at YouTube now.
Right.
So what they were finding was after they did this for the first time, they had a spike, obviously, in viewing figures when it was live. And then what they were telling me was last time it went quiet for a few days, but then they had another spike where people are actually watching it again, almost like the iPlayer type phenomenon of watching it again. And then what they were able to do is they were able to see, because the Facebook page and the Twitter account are running continuously, students were then asking questions after they'd watched the video to the members of staff via those mediums, and then they were able to respond to them in a timely fashion.
That's superb.
And they really, really enjoyed it as well. That was the first time they did it, it was a bit nerve-wracking for everyone involved, but this time around, it was brilliant. They're actually having fun, and I kind of walked in afterwards and went, "How was that? How was it?" And they were like, "This is brilliant," because they had all these questions coming in, and the feedback from the students was really nice because what they were saying was it gave us a chance to see the people. It emphasised the humanness of the course.
Yes.
They got to see who the kind of individuals they'd be dealing with. And they were able to ask the questions that maybe they wouldn't ask face-to-face, or maybe they'd be too shy to ask face-to-face. So, and there was everything from kind of like questions about the course, to accommodation, to, you know, what kind of the nightlife was like. And if any question came up that Andy and Charlie couldn't answer, they were able to say, well, we don't know the answer to that right away, but we'll go and find out for you, and we'll get back to you.
Yeah.
And it was just brilliant, and I was so pleased and proud for them. I was kind of emailing like all the great and the good of the university, going, "Look at this is great," purely because it was one of those times where we'd done everything we could, and we kind of took a step back and just watched them, to use a sport analogy, pick up the ball and run with it. I was just over the moon for them. Basically, it was like, my work here is done. Now you guys can go and do the business. But it was really, really good. I mean, so I've mentioned it now because I'll put a link to the video that they did, the actual live seminar, in the blog, so people can watch it again. But it
might be great to kind of, if people want to drop in on maybe the next session that they're running and watch the next live video, it'd be great to kind of see what these guys are doing and actually see it for yourself. Actually, picking up on a couple of points you said there, I mean, I can see straight away the use of something like this. It's a fantastic way to showcase the university and also the courses they do. You mentioned about students coming along to open days but not necessarily asking the questions. I mean, I can remember back to sort of my pre-university days and going to open days, and it was a huge event, and it was quite nerve-wracking for somebody who, all you've ever known is school all your life, and then you're taken out into the big wide world of university, and it is quite scary, and there are questions you want to ask, but it's very easy for them to disappear out of your head and you don't get a chance. Whereas if you've got that opportunity to sit down in your own living room and watch the session in a more relaxed environment, you're going to have the questions in your mind, you can jot them down on a bit of paper beforehand and not feel scared to kind of ping those questions off to the tutors that are there. The other point as well I was going to make was that you said about Andy and Charlie not writing their own questions, first of all, but not needing them. I can absolutely vouch for that, because I watched the live session and I could hear in the background, ever so faintly, Andy's emails pinging constantly as people fired emails in. So it goes to show that it works, and it works very well. And I think it'd be brilliant for the listeners to kind of dip in and have a listen to their sessions.
And particularly in terms of the technology that was used. Like, I mean, they had a bog standard laptop with a built-in webcam, and everything else was completely free. They just sat down and they just did it. And then the other nice thing, this was really nice. There was a couple of students who were watching it, who, if you've got like a smart TV or a Virgin box or a Sky box, you can actually watch YouTube on that. Right. So they were able to actually, rather than be at a computer, sit on the sofa and actually watch it like a TV show, and with their phones, send in the questions via their phones and get that kind of live interaction as it was going on. So it was just really, really nice to see kind of students able to access it in a way that they wanted to, on the hardware that they wanted to, but also, not be tied down to a particular time, because if they did miss it, well, it's still up there.
Absolutely. And I don't think Andy and Charlie are booked in to come in and do a podcast session probably till around about the beginning of April. So hopefully by that point they'll have done their third one. So they're going to be quite seasoned pros at this by that point. So it'll be really useful to kind of fire some questions at them and see from their point of view how they found it. And also, because I'm guessing they'll have had some feedback from students kind of during and after the sessions, it'll be really interesting to see what students think about it. as a way of coming and asking questions if they can't make it to an open day, but also and kind of harping back to this statement of kind of extra added value. You know, the fact that you don't just need to come to open day, you can have these live drop-in sessions with the tutor, and you can watch the video on YouTube afterwards, and you can come into the open day and meet people. I mean, and the more information you can get as a prospective student, the better it is for you, I think.
And it's worth stressing that they still do the face-to-face open days as well. It's not an instead of. It was just, well, if for whatever reason you can't come in, or maybe you're a mature student, you might have a job, you might have kids, whatever it might be. This is just another avenue to get. I'm going to bring Dr. Carl Peters in here because he's kind of nodding and.
I'm nodding because you pinched all my stories.
But no, we had that. I mean, we had a discussion a couple of weeks back. I know there was some debate about how can you get prospective students to find out more about all the great stuff that goes on. I mean,
well, I think the crucial thing for me in all this is that students get to meet the staff. And perhaps, as you said, Paul, in a natural sort of setting, a natural environment, one they're familiar with, and using technology that demonstrates that we do understand how the technology works, we do use it, and we will use it as part of the program students are studying on. So I think that gives them some connection with the staff and a connection with the technology, which I think is very, very valuable. I mean, one of the things that we've struggled with over the years is making predictions about how many people are going to pitch up to events.
Sure.
And if you know you're doing something that's getting out there and you're getting feedback to say it's effective, and it's very good value for people's time. They're more likely to do it again. They're more likely to tell other colleagues to try it, and it'll spread. Because people are taking a bit of a pitch at doing some of this stuff. As you said, it's, to start with, it's a bit of a risk. And some people are good risk takers, and other people aren't good risk takers. And in this case, it's been a very good risk, and they've done extremely well. And we look forward to finding out about the success the thing's having. I was sitting here for about 2-3 minutes thinking how old I feel as we go through some of this stuff, and I was reflecting back to my first proper computer that I used seriously was 30 years ago now.
Yeah.
And it was a Macintosh.
Right.
And I was given a job. I was a PhD student. I was given a job of typing up some references for some of the research fellows. So they paid me, money to type things onto a computer, which I thought was just money for nothing, really. But it was a really old, old Macintosh. And the other thing I was thinking about was my old very first Amstrad computer, which had 16K of memory. That's not megabytes. That's 16K of memory. That in old money, that would be 4 sides of A4. That's all you could save on the computer before you had to take your disk out and replace it. And I actually physically myself chipped it up to make it into 32K. Wow. Doubled the memory by buying some chips and taking the back off and adding it. This is what you did in the early days.
Absolutely.
Really. So things have tremendously moved on, and I think we are on a very. I'm sat here with my iPad on my lap, with my iPhone in my pocket. I shouldn't be publicising all these Apple products, should I? But,
that's okay.
They have become a normal part of the job, haven't they?
They have. They have.
We've become, I think, fairly reliant on them. And one of the things I thought I was going to perhaps talk a little bit about today is how we see technology and use technology, and particularly in education. I think we're moving to a position now where we have to recognise that people have their own technology rather than us buying technology for people, and with all the associated costs of renewal and upgrades and so forth. So people are coming along with their laptops, with their iPads, with their iPhones or Android phones or whatever, and they are using the technology. And our job really is to make sure that they can use that technology in an effective way in whatever setting we can provide them. So that's what we're working towards, certainly in the faculty and I know in the rest of the university. I mean, some people have anxieties about that.
Sure.
Because it's a loss of control. When you provide in the technology and the software and everything else, you have some element of control over things. Whereas when people are using their own technology, I think there's a little bit of a loss of control, and some people are anxious about that. But I firmly believe it's a tide we can't stop, and we're better working with it than we are trying to resist it. I know this, in the sort of world I live in terms of schools and education as well. We've had long discussions with head teachers and IT managers in schools. What are the problems with opening up the school to the internet and taking down some of the barriers? And a lot of the barriers are things that you have to manage or deal with rather than put up artificial constructs really, just to stop people. We've come across schools that IT classes that can't use the internet. How mad is that? But it is out there. So we have children in school, young adults and adults in education who are far ahead of their teachers and others using the technology because they use it when they go home. So we can't avoid that. We can't, avoid that logic really. And what we've got to try and do is work with that. So, increasing demands on us for technology, because the staff are having to catch up with the learners.
Yeah.
So the staff are saying, "I need an iPad, I need a laptop, I need an iPhone." And it's gone past the cosmetic, I think, in terms of just a fashion item. It is genuinely because this is the way that people are using technology these days. You talked about the sport and the YouTube. I think that's a fantastic example. But we have others. One of the things that we've been trying to work on recently are webinars.
Yep.
And I think that sort of use of the technology whereby you have a real expertise in a member of staff or in a team, and they want to tell people about it.
Sure.
And people want to listen to that. So I think we are learning how to use that technology. Again, I think the technology is there. It's relatively simple to access. It's perhaps a small licensing fee and so forth, but it is something you can do. You don't need a lot of expertise in. I think a lot of staff are worried that they have to have high levels of technical competence to do things. But clearly, a lot of things, they can do a huge amount of things with a relatively low level of technical competence, but perhaps just a bit of confidence.
That's the thing I like about it, is that it breaks down those walls, because particularly within your particular faculty, Carl and I were both part of it
in a former
existence. But we know from working with colleagues that are part of it, there's a tremendous knowledge and a skill set there. And I suppose previously it would be quite hard to kind of make folks who are outside of the university aware of that. Whereas these days you can actually say, one of the things, like when I first came to the University of Wales Newport 4 years ago now, was I said I wanted to create superstar lecturers. That was what I wanted to do, so that people would go, oh, I know so and so, they know their stuff. So it wasn't necessarily they're talking about the name of an institution, but actually about individuals who are experts within their field, that people say, I want to study with that person as my tutor or as my PhD advisor. So that for me, absolutely, it's all about kind of breaking down the barriers and promoting almost the humanness of it and the skill set of the people that we've got. And anything we can do which says to people, don't worry about the technology, you just be you. And
most people are frustrated by how they get their information out, how they get their message across, how they tell people what they do. Because we've had traditional ways of doing it, publishing journal articles, writing books, going to speak at conferences and so forth. But they are only part of the picture. And I think, the opportunities are much broader these days than perhaps they used to be. And people are experimenting, they are trying things. I suppose one of the issues we have is that we set up technology and then we raise expectations. We've got to make sure that we deliver on that.
Yes, absolutely.
So when we have websites, people have expectations now. They go on websites which are fast, they're clean, they work well, they one click and so forth. And I think we've got to work whenever we can to try and meet those sort of same standards and expectations that people have. Another perhaps a little story I was going to say, or thing I was going to mention, was Turnitin. Turnitin is a piece of software that most academic staff now are very familiar with, and they've been using it for some years in terms of it's supposed to be used for students, sort of self-help, really, to understand how they're writing and whether they're referencing properly and using sources accurately. And it's become known as sort of plagiarism software, but that's not its intention explicitly. But you can take the technology a lot further. And one of my roles I fulfill at the moment is I'm an external examiner up in Scotland for the University of the West of Scotland.
Oh, yeah.
They've started using Turnitin in a quite a full way. So all the students submit their work into Turnitin, but all the staff then will assess their work on Turnitin.
Right.
And they will put in-text comments on the text, and they'll put a summary assessment in there, and it's all saved and it's available, and I can access it as an external examiner remotely. I'm going to have things sent to me in the post, back for the post office and so forth. So very, very effective. But again, you have to have a team of people who are prepared to push things a bit, because when they first started doing it, they hit a barrier, which was speed. They found that it was extremely slow. So what they needed to do was actually move away from the web browser they were using, which was whatever we use.
Internet Explorer, was it? Yep.
Yeah. And they've had to use Firefox.
Yeah. Internet Explorer is normally the most problematic thing we come across.
So immediately we
Sorry,
had
Microsoft.
To install Firefox. To use, and with Firefox, it was instant. And I think, again, unless people have a little bit of technical knowledge, they can get really frustrated by some of these things. But using it now, and they've had to do things such as increasing the word limit on various things where they're only allowed to put 150 letters in feedback. They've extended that. Working, again, an example for me of academics working very closely with the IT support team, saying what they need. We have a problem. How do we solve it? Team then goes away and finds them a solution. Now, even over a period of 3 years, I've seen that dramatically change. And it's a very good example for me of collaborative working in terms of the use of technology. They could have given up, couldn't they? They could have stopped after and said, "This isn't working. It's not going to meet our needs," and that's the end of it. It's commercial software. It's not working. But they pushed it a bit, and it is working. I think the other one quick point I was going to make was, again, because things have happened this week in terms of meetings and so forth. We had a video conference on Monday. I have a meeting where I chair, which is across Wales. And we had 3 centres coming into that meeting from different parts of Wales by video conference. And I had about 12 people here at the Killeen site. So, it stops people having to travel huge distances. I think the technology's improved a lot. The quality.
This is using the Welsh Video Conferencing Network. It is very good.
I mean, it was excellent, in fairness.
I mean, when I first started teaching about 12 years ago, it just come in, and I remember it had big kind of bulky box type TVs, and it was all a bit kind of like low rent. But nowadays, it's high definition. The sound's amazing. It's really good.
I don't think it's used enough. Is a point I was going to make. Really, we have a suite of Killeen which is very good. City Centre has the technology as well. In the conference room, is it? I think.
I believe so. Yeah.
But it is easy to use. I think people are again a bit frightened of it. And they're tracking many miles for meetings and so forth, and don't really always think about. I know we can use Skype as well, and that works very well. But this is such high quality that if you wanted to do something with documents or have a number of people there, it's easier than trying to huddle around your microphone and your camera.
Well, we're taking the same approach. I mean, we as a team, we'll use Skype an awful lot for our day-to-day stuff. But if we have to have a meeting with at the moment, our university is merging with another university, and we need to have meetings with our counterparts and future colleagues. And because of that, and because we want to have a more like a meeting type atmosphere, if you like, we're going to be using the video conferencing suite because I want basically all of my team to be round the same table as opposed to someone's at their computer over there. So it takes on a different kind of atmosphere, if you like, a more productive one if that's what you're trying to achieve.
I was wondering what you felt about in terms of how things are going at the university, in terms of where the sort of the current trends are, the ideas are. What's interesting at the moment.
Well, I think it tends to vary from... Actually, rather oddly, I think it tends to vary from campus to campus. But that's probably more to do with the fact that there are different sort of faculties with different interests in particular areas. So I think what's of interest and what's kind of prominent on this campus isn't necessarily reflected down at our other campus in the city centre.
For those of you who are new to the podcast, University of Wales Newport has 2 campuses. One's up in leafy Killeen, and one is in Newport city centre, kind of on the riverfront, isn't it, I guess?
Yes, that's right, yeah. I mean, personally, I can only really talk for the city campus because that's my base, and that's kind of where I do most of my work. And unfortunately, our colleague Elizabeth, who is the learning technologist for this campus, unfortunately is ill today, so I can't give you much of a response from that point of view. But certainly from the city centre campus's point of view, what I've noticed with a number of areas over the last sort of few months, and it's something you've already talked about, the interest of trying to make things more distance learning by including things like webinars, for example. We've got a few courses down at City Campus which are completely distance learning courses. So their key areas of interest are how can we get the information to students without having to physically get them sat in front of a computer at a particular time on a particular date, and we're stood in front of a camera and we have to literally switch on at a certain time. The students have to log in wherever they are. They want to make things available 24/7 wherever the students are based around the world, and have access to this information. So things like trying to create a lot more videos. That's a key area. Staff are looking to create a lot more videos to get up onto our VLE that they can get information out to students. So they're kind of moving away from traditional things like PowerPoint, for example, for their presentations, and using bits of software like Prezi, which we've touched on in previous podcasts, because it makes their videos more interesting, and it means that they can kind of create useful videos that that look nice, essentially. That's not to say that we sit down and tell staff you should be using Prezi. That isn't the case. It's one of the key things we try to do is we always try to offer alternatives that are available.
Sure.
But whether you choose to use that alternative or whether you just see it as giving yourself another skill, but you stick to what you know, that's absolutely fine. And if you are going to stick to what you know, then our key ethos is, well, that's fine. Well, let's show you how to make the most out of the thing you know, as opposed to having to, change your mindset and learn something completely new. If you're not happy with it, that's fine. We'll show you how to get the most out of the thing that you use on a daily basis.
I mean, the kind of the methodology we employ is something called scenario-based design. And again, I'll put a link to this underneath the podcast, but just to give you a very, very brief overview, the idea at the fundamental, kind of at the heart of scenario-based design is you go to the educator or the person you're working with and you say, okay, forget about the technology, what would you like? And just use your imagination. What would you like? Dream, if you like. And then we ask them to write us a little story, plain English story, no technology, no geek speak, about how they'd like things to be in 6, 12, 18 months' time. When they give us that story back, we are then able to identify the functionality that any software or any tool needs to have in order to allow them to achieve that dream, that goal, that scenario. And then we'll say to them, well, okay, if you want to you've said that you want to be able to achieve this, these are your options in terms of what you can use. And it's almost like a mini buffet, if you like. And we say, well, which one would you like to use? And then it's almost like we give them a little taster, and then they'll go, I want to use that one. And so for a presentation, in some cases they might go, I want to use PowerPoint. Sometimes they might say, I want to use Prezi. Sometimes we turn around and go, use a flip chart and a pen. It all depends on what they go. I mean, in terms of, to go back to the original question, in terms of kind of the things that we get asked about, they tend to fall into 3 main categories. Obviously, there's the teaching and learning aspect, or the digital pedagogy. But actually, in my experience, that comes second to administration and logistics. And I think it's because most of certainly our staff here and in wider education, there is an awful lot of administration and logistics that they are required to do as part of their role. And so what they're trying to do is, they're not trying to shirk it at all, but they're trying to say, well, look, I want to put my energy into the teaching and the learning, because this is what I entered the profession to do. Is there any way that you can help me deal with the admin so I've got more energy? Or time just to spend with my students talking about the subject and constructing knowledge and sharing ideas and that kind of stuff. So we get a lot of the things we'll be asked to do on a daily basis will stem from a need, and the need will be to try and support the staff to do all the admin and logistics, which is, they value its importance. But they're saying, well, is there any way we can work a little bit smarter so I can spend more time? The other thing we tend to get sometimes is, again, this has only really happened in the last 18 months or so, is staff wanting to establish their own personal brand. Yeah. So staff saying, yes, I recognise the value of the institution I work at. Absolutely, they pay my salary. But, let's all be realistic here. If I'm going to have a career, I probably won't be in the same university until I retire. Is there any way that I can get myself out there in an academic way, in a way that's respected by my peers, but people go, oh, I know that individual, they did a really good talk on such and such. And it's kind of, and in some cases, it's a case of saying, well, here's a person who's been published in lots of peer-reviewed journals. How do we let other people know about this individual's work? So it's that kind of thing. So we spend a lot of time working with people on that side of things. So it'll be, maybe sometimes we talk to them about how they can use LinkedIn, sometimes they'll use Twitter, sometimes they'll create a little website, sometimes we'll talk to them about, there's a lovely site called Academia EDU, which is like a Facebook kind of thing, but it's for academics. And on there you can make a little profile and you can basically put links to all of your published journals, and you can follow your peers. And so when they have something new that comes out, be it a journal article, or maybe they're giving a talk somewhere, you actually get alerted about this. And the nice thing I like about Academia EDU is it emails you when someone searches for you. So it doesn't tell you who searched for you, but you kind of get an idea of what people are looking for and what they're kind of after. So that's been something that's kind of growing, I'd say, but the number one kind of thing we tend to get is that administration and logistics, things like, online submission, online marking, and how we can make that easier for people. Because again, there is that fear of, well, if I'm going to do some online marking, I mean, obviously, if I've cut my teeth the last 20 years by picking up the script and writing on it, nothing wrong with that at all. How does that then translate if I'm working on a computer? So a lot of the time we'll spend kind of listening to what people say and go, well, okay, you could do it like this or you could do it like that. What works best for you? But we seem to get through an awful lot of cups of tea and biscuits, more so than the technology.
It's really, the practicality is really important, and I think you're absolutely right. And efficiency and use of the technology for efficiency is really, really important. I was going to ask a question about to go to the other extreme then, which is that what are the issues that are sort of hitting the academic press and making people sit up. I think things like Moocs, for example.
Yeah.
Where everything you pick up now is about Moocs. And
it is,
whether Moocs are going to be successful and open publishing and so forth.
Indeed.
So, massive issues.
Absolutely.
Paradigm shifting issues, really, aren't they? Potentially. Yeah. But are they? Are they that significant? Is there evidence that that's the direction of travel?
I mean... Okay, if we deal with the MOOC one first, I think I've already gone on record on this podcast saying I personally am not convinced by MOOCs at the moment. And the reason I'm not convinced by MOOCs is this. Almost all the research that's gone into how people learn, whether it be pedagogy or andragogy, how adults learn, basically comes down to this idea of distance learning or online learning, not blended learning, but solely online learning, will work for a subset of people. And those people tend to be, so the research says, kind of highly self-motivated, are able to kind of work on their own initiative and all that kind of stuff. For those individuals who, for whatever reason, will need a little bit of help and support, which is probably 70 to 80% of a cohort going through at some point, the sheer scale of these MOOCs, if you've got thousands of people going in, can be overwhelming for them. So I think at the moment, there's a little bit of a bandwagon going on. I think I said in another podcast, it reminded me of Second Life syndrome 4 or 5 years ago when it was like, we're all going to do it on Second Life. And that didn't really work. So I think MOOCs have their place. And I think they will lend themselves to certain topics. But for certain subjects, and for the vast majority of people, I think you'd be wise to consider a blended approach. A bit like the Open University does. They say, well, you can study online, but we'll hold face-to-face seminars in a town or a city near you. But studying, I'm doing a master's at the moment, which has been solely online, and that's been fine for me because I live and breathe this stuff. But I know that some of my peers who I have on like Skype and I talk to them, sometimes just kind of want to touch base with a real person, and it can be quite difficult to feel like you're not getting lost in the crowd. So there might be issues there in terms of retention. I suppose if you've got thousands of people on and you lose 10%, your numbers are still good, but it's still a lot of people. So MOOCs, I'm not overly convinced, and I think at the moment they are being heralded. I think some people are viewing them as a way to essentially save money. I'm not overly convinced at the moment that the quality of education they're going to give to to an average member of the public, I'm not convinced that that's the sole solution. I think in conjunction with something else maybe, but...
I've got to agree with you, actually, and the reason I've got my phone right next to the microphone, so apologies there, is as those listeners of the podcast will know, we went to the BET show a couple of weeks ago, and one of the talks that we went to, and unfortunately I can't remember the name of the gentleman who gave the talk, so I have to apologise if you have to be listening, but he gave a talk called The Perfect Storm, Understanding the Changing Face of Technology in Higher Education, and one of the things he specifically talked about was MOOCs, and about their impact on higher education and what impact he felt they would have, and I think pretty much he would back up exactly what you've just said, Paul, that they have their place, but whether they're going to create such a huge impact that people think maybe they are, maybe it very much feels like it is a bandwagon movement at the moment, but as you say, you still need to have all those aspects and elements of higher education that you know and love, that take place now, and I think it's a long way off from completely getting rid of that way of teaching, and so absolutely.
Well, particularly in Carl's faculty, we have a nationally renowned counselling team.
Yes.
Actually,
I've got to correct you there. They're actually worldwide recognised. In the last review we had, they actually achieved worldwide recognition for some of the research that the outputs that they created. So I've got to correct you on that one.
Sorry, sorry. But they're fantastic. They're a fantastic bunch of people, and they work really hard. And it's something like that. Well, I'm not sure you could teach counselling via a MOOC, to be honest, because you actually need to be in a room with people. And so I think, certain subjects might lend themselves, but
I think we've been around this argument forever, haven't we? Whenever technologies come in, it was the end of sort of teachers and classrooms and people coming into establishments. Absolutely. It was the radio or the television or whatever. I work with the Open University myself, and you have students that look forward to the times they can come in and meet each other and the summer schools and so forth. It's a really important part of the experience, isn't it? I mean, it's different if you're not able to do that, but if you are, I think it becomes a valuable part of the overall HE experience and interaction with people. And I don't think it's the same on discussion fora and boards and so forth. I think you do need that personal contact sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
To make it a real experience.
And the other thing is you can't get. I mean, if you're having a discussion with people on an online forum, things can get misinterpreted because you can't hear the intonation in people's voices, and so yes, you can use things like smiley faces and stuff, but you tend to find that a passionate academic debate, which is had between two or more colleagues, which is all done, everyone respects one another and they're friendly, but they're passionate about something. If you were to transcribe that and put that on a forum, that could be interpreted as maybe something slightly different.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've been examining another course which is purely online and supported by tutors with email and with discussion before and things like that. But what happened, and this is just happened, is that the students started setting up self-help groups and started meeting in pubs. Because they wanted that contact with people. So it's a fascinating microcosm of the big MOOC debate, really, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes, it is.
Technology catches up with that, and we have. I mean, as you said, Second Life was one sort of way.
It was, It was going to be
towards sort of humanization of that content, isn't it? But I don't know where we are with Second Life these days. But really important. I suppose my follow-up question on the MOOC sort of argument was. Clearly, there's a huge amount of resource out there now. So why would I want an academic member of staff to be spending time developing resources from scratch? And,
Good point.
Lots of energy. So accessing resources that have been developed by very very influential, perhaps heavily resourced organisations. We'd want to do that, but I think the danger of that, and we saw a lot of this when the coalition government came in Westminster, where they effectively closed down lots and lots of websites that had huge amounts of resource that we put in over a period of years, and that resource just disappeared. And I think that's a concern for people. When they're using digital technology, particularly when the technology is remote, or so the information is remote, is that just going to suddenly disappear? So all this talk. Am I better preparing all my own stuff than I am using something online? So,
actually, that's a really good point, and that's something we've experienced on a number of different sites, because we don't always take everything we look at and put it out there to academic staff, but we always like to have a go ourselves. And actually, before we kind of got into the Second Life area, we did tinker for a while with Google Lively, absolutely. And Paul actually had me creating an online Google Lively counselling room, which was going to be used for distance learning counselling sessions for people to drop into. And I spent quite a long time developing and creating this Google Lively counselling room. And
he's not bitter.
Not bitter at all. No, I spent ages picking some nice pot plants to go on the tables in the room and everything. And then what happened essentially was that Google pulled the plug on it a couple of weeks after the thing had been created, which was a real shame. But a good example of how very, very quickly something you put a lot of time and effort in can just disappear and you've lost what you've done.
I think the best, in my opinion, the best approach to do these things. I mean, I was over in Lincoln a couple of weeks back talking about open educational resources and this idea of, well, rather than creating your own stuff from scratch or using something that's off the shelf, because I know, certainly in my experience working with educators, they do like to kind of personalise things. Of course they do, because that's, it's part of the profession, is to basically say, well, okay, here's how you can find a load of stuff that you can use that's royalty-free, copyright-free, you won't get into trouble. And here's how you can combine those building blocks, a bit like Lego really, to make something that you want. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. You're not spending hours making a diagram with all the details on, but you can take a load of things, a bit like stickers, and arrange them in any way that you want that's bespoke to your class. So you get something that's personal to you, but also has taken you half an hour to put together rather than 4 or 5 hours because you're drawing something from scratch by hand. And then it's a case of saying, well, where are you going to put this? And that comes down to this, and it kind of comes back to what was talked about the personal branding thing is well, as long as your institution is okay with it, then you could host it on your own site, be it Wix or Google site or YouTube or whatever it might be. Alternatively, certainly here at University of Wales Newport, we've got the Moodle system. You can say, well, I'm going to post that thing on the Moodle system where my students can access it.
But a discipline that we're trying to instill in students and in staff really is one where they check the resource is still alive.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I mean, you might make an assumption a book is still in the library or a journal is still on a shelf, but you can't make an assumption that website is still there or it's even called that anymore. Yeah. So we do require students, particularly when they're doing assignments, to check the sites, the information on the site is still there, usually twice during the study to give it some sort of reliability feature. But I think it's equally important that if I was preparing a module for next year, then I'd go back and check my sources were still there.
Absolutely.
And actually, this is a big problem. When we first started working with staff, when Moodle was quite new to the university, one of the biggest problems we found was that staff were putting up really useful resources, and other staff, instead of having to re-upload those resources, were linking to the resources on another member of staff's Moodle page. Yeah. But of course, what happened was that member of staff then either moved it or deleted it or whatever, and all the links were breaking. So they were absolutely it's really worth bearing in mind.
But I know on the Harvard referencing system, we use a variant of that here at Newport, don't we? Certainly, when you're referencing a website, you're supposed to put the date it was last accessed it to kind of as a gentle reminder to the author that maybe you need to check it's still there.
Because people treat digital information very differently to sort of walking into a library, don't they? Although technically they should treat them the same, shouldn't they? Yeah. Because it's the same thing. So common problem is where students will access will cite the website they found the document on rather than the document itself.
Yes.
And what they've read is the document, not the website.
Yeah.
Where they found it. I wouldn't say I found this in Cardiff University Library or in
absolutely.
Morgan's library or in our library or whatever. You'd say what you've read.
Yeah.
But people somehow think that the web address, the URL, is the more important thing to cite. So there's still some way to go, I think, in terms of digital literacy.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And getting people to understand exactly what they mean by information and where that information is stored.
Sure. You touched upon open publishing as well, self-publishing. I mean, this is something that's kind of it's starting to bubble away, and it's an interesting one because I mean, my philosophy is always kind of everything should be, wherever possible, open, free, all that kind of stuff. I'm a massive believer in open source and free technologies. One of my, I mean, and I do have, I agree with, I think, I can't remember the name of the gentleman now, but he's kind of started all this stuff off. It was an academic somewhere. He said, well, hang on a second, why are we the academics doing all the work to go into these journals, which are peer reviewed, and that's fine. But then it's a walled garden that other people have to pay to get into. So I like the idea of open publishing, but it's about how do you maintain its parity of esteem with those walled garden. I like the idea of people being able. I mean, I'm a big fan of Wikipedia. I love Wikipedia because for your average member of the public, it's a phenomenal resource to go on there. And yes, sometimes people put silly things on, but by and large, that gets corrected and taken down. So I'm a big fan in having everyone able to access everything, but it's about how you maintain its academic credibility or parity. And I don't have an answer for that. I don't know. But I mean, I like the idea, but I'm just kind of there's a small little asterisk in the corner which is flashing. Well, how do you maintain its credibility and its academic integrity compared to a well-established peer-reviewed journal?
And I think that is a very, very live debate. We have that discussion regularly. Should students use Wikipedia sites for their work? I think I'm with you on this one, Paul. I mean, you have to use it carefully, but a lot of the Wikipedia information now is very, very good. It's verified.
Yeah.
It's put in by academics. It's put in by people who know what they're talking about. How the outside world knows that, I think, is the question.
Yeah, absolutely.
How they can check the veracity of the information.
Yeah.
But it is improving, I suspect, and people are updating and changing and making sure the information is accurate. And again, it's one of those things I think where we can't uninvent it.
No,
it is there. And you might say in the old days, what would you do? Well, would you say that the Encyclopedia Britannica was a better encyclopedia than a children's encyclopedia, for example, or an encyclopedia in the local library that was not as extensive?
Yeah.
Where do you stop with that argument? And who decides? It's the old story, isn't it? Who decides what's accurate and what's right? And I think we got to get away from people perhaps relying upon information to questioning information and asking about where does this come from, who's written it, why have they written it this way. That's probably a more useful skill to develop than just simply finding the information. Because I think we've made finding the information incredibly easy.
Absolutely.
It's incredibly easy now. In fact, what we know we have to do is train people and give them the skills to actually filter that information, choose the right information, check its accuracy, check its veracity, and so forth. And I think we've got a lot of work still to do on that.
Definitely.
But you can't turn back the tide. I mean, people will pick up their laptops, their iPads, or whatever, and they will find answers to problems and questions that they have, and they'll find them on their own. And I know a lot of academics and professionals are very worried about this because it's deprofessionalizing them. What's going on with their knowledge, their experience? If somebody could pick up a relatively cheap device and access a phenomenal amount of information.
Well, I mean,
what's the place?
Just holding up a smartphone for the benefit of anyone watching the podcast.
Paul to just lift his phone up and wave it around and agree.
My view is that people shouldn't be terrified about that. I mean, I think it's a challenge for us as academics to decide what our role is, and it's not to rubbish the technology or to rubbish Wikipedia or to to say things like that. It's to actually explain to people how information is developed, how information is discovered, how it's shared and communicated. How you know whether the information is accurate or factual. But we've got to develop those skills in people, the information skills in people, rather than feeding them information. And I think most people have cottoned onto that a number of years ago. It's not about somebody standing in front of a group and telling them all they know about something anymore.
Are there any technologies or tools that you use on a daily basis that you couldn't do without? Is there something that you think,
that's a good question, isn't it? Listen to the news this week, how many people could live, for a day without their iPhones? It's a fascinating discussion, isn't it? And every 6.5 minutes you check something like that.
Sounds about right.
There's some quite scary figures popping up now, aren't there? And there was a lovely thing on the television this week. I don't know whether people saw it, but there was a film of a high street going back in the 80s, and they filmed the high street for a few minutes, and then they filmed the high street now. And the difference was obviously very, very striking, because in the high street of the 80s, everybody's walking up and down, just quite happily, and now everybody's walking up and down with a phone glued to the ears. Very different use of information. And the question was, does it help? Is communication any better? Does it undermine what we do? Does it make us very different? And the expert they had on was saying that it was a very good thing that people used the phone. They did maintain contact with people, much more likely to be in contact with people than perhaps they would have been along. Just a little anecdote, really. I was in India a couple of years ago with a trip from the university, and we visited a slum in a city called Madurai, in the south of India. And this slum was for people who had AIDS, women who had AIDS and their children. And they had houses that had been donated by the charity, and each family had a house. And they showed us it and showed us all the kitchen and the sleeping areas. Fantastic project. And sat outside one house was a shelf, and on the shelf was a old-fashioned big red telephone. And it was plugged into some device on the wall. And I was asking somebody, what's this? Oh, that's the street telephone. I thought, how often is it used? He said, well, it's never used because everybody's got mobile phones. Because what happened was they jumped from a technology which was very poor across the country in terms of landlines to suddenly everybody having a mobile phone. And this is in a slum I'm talking about now. I'm not talking about... And the sad thing is, I suppose, if you think of it as sad, but they were spending a huge amount of their income on their mobile phones. But it was deemed to be so important in terms of maintaining communication with their families and so forth that it was absolutely vital. And you hear lots and lots of stories about this, but the difference technology has made. If you've got your rural farmer in Africa and he has a health problem, he can either walk two days walk to the health centre and hope that the doctor's there, or he can check on his phone to see whether the doctor's going to be there in 2 days' time, and make the journey. So we forget that the technology is used in quite different ways, and I suppose we've become very blasé. Could I do without any of it? It's a very good question, isn't it? I think if it sat there as yours was, Carl, buzzing away and beeping and making noises at you, then it's almost like a living, breathing thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
You look at, it's like those game things used to get years ago. These animals used to look after them.
Tamagotchis.
Yeah.
They're making a comeback.
They're a bit like that. People treat their phones, I think, a bit like a living pet almost. And they upgrade it and it grows, and they feed it with apps and various other things. I'm increasingly using the iPad. I must say, I suppose, though, that I'm one of these people that used to keep a day book, an exercise day book, a hardback book, and write all my stuff in that, and every meeting and everything. And you build up loads and loads and loads of them over the years, and occasionally you go back and have to look things up and so forth. And I found that one of the biggest differences, a real tug, to move over to using a digital notepad for that. And I still find it difficult. There are still occasions where I'll use the paper version rather than typing it up. Sometimes your batteries run down, you can't use it. Other times, as I say, you want to be doing something with email and you can't because there's no signal there. So I think it's using the technology to its advantage, using it for what it's good at, but not being frightened to go back, as it were, to using the old technology if you feel that's what's helpful.
Well, actually, you've just mentioned something that I was going to mention, which is kind of the point of technology is great and there's lots of stuff out there, but you've got to be wary of not that sort of technology for technology's sake thing, which is something that I know Paul kind of did experience when the iPads first came out, certainly, because suddenly you had an influx of people saying, "I need an iPad." Well, why do you need an iPad? Well, there was no response. Well, I need an iPad because it's new and it's out there and it looks nice, but I don't know what it does and I don't know how it will impact on my daily work.
There's an
life.
academic term for this. It's called Techno Centricity.
Yes,
it's a thing that's been researched. It's people kind of saying the mere presence of the technology in the room will make things better. And you're like, well, really? I first saw it. iPad is the latest kind of thing that's brought, but you can roll it right the way back to kind of like things like smart boards. People put smart boards in. You go, well, how do you use it? And if people say, well, I use it in exactly the same way as I would use a blackboard and a piece of chalk, well, use a blackboard and a piece of chalk then. Absolutely.
Well, as a sort of an anecdote to that, I've been speaking to my partner the other day. She works for social services, and they have a special room which has sort of all the technology and stuff in there. They can do presentations for sort of teenagers with learning disabilities, and they've got a smart board in this room. And one of her questions to me was, what do I need to do to get this thing working? And I asked, well, what have you got apart from the smart board? And she said, well, there's nothing else in there. There's no computer, there's no projector. We've just got this smart board, but nobody's thought what else we need. Somebody said you need a smart board, so they bought one and put it in this room.
Sadly, that is not a one-off.
No, absolutely, I'm sure.
Many local authorities a number of years ago bought smart boards for their classrooms, not understanding the technology, and you had lots of classrooms with a £1,200 smart board on the wall and nothing to feed it.
We had, back in episode 6, we had Andrew Williams come in. He's the school's ICT strategic manager, and he was saying that this was the challenge he was facing, is that certainly within the schools they wanted to buy iPads, and he was saying, well, it's just a tool, it's a tablet. Have you considered the Google Nexus 7, which is half the price and does everything that the iPad does? And he was kind of tearing his hair out almost, because they were spending the budget on all these iPads, and then, like you say, no thought had been given to, well, how are they going to be used in a pedagogically sound way? How are the staff going to be developed? What apps are you going to use? Have you got the money to pay for them? If an app costs you £5, does that mean you're going to have to roll that out on all of your device? So it's all of this kind of stuff that but again, unfortunately, I think it's just a symptom, and it'll happen again with something else in 5 years' time. It's this thing of, and it goes back to what we're talking about the Moocs as well. Everyone's kind of looking for that silver bullet that's going to revolutionise things.
We'll all be very, very shortly wearing the Google Glass, no doubt, which has been sort of highly publicised recently. And I think that maybe that's
we might have to get a pair of those.
I think we might have to get a pair just to check it over. Okay, so I think that's everything for this week. So I just want to wrap up this podcast by saying, first of all, thank you very much to our special guest, Dr. Carl Peters. Thank you for coming along and giving us a really useful and interesting talk. Thank you very much to Paul as well, our usual contributor, and a huge thank you to myself for listening. Hopefully we'll catch you again next week.